Welcome back, everybody, to another week here of Track Talk. Steve Kaplowitz joined, as always, by the voice of Sunland Park Racetrack and Casino. He is Eric Alwan. Eric, great to have you back. And as we head into another weekend of live racing, I think the biggest story is what happened last week. 6 stakes races over Thursday and Friday, including a prep for the Sunland Derby. I mean, we're not used to giving horse racing fans this much quality this early in the racing season.
Good to see you again, too, Steve. It was a whole smorgasbord of events, especially Thursday and Friday, where we got to see some great thoroughbred talent and maybe get to see the future of what the Sunland Derby is going to look like. We had the Riley Allison Derby, and I think we have a legitimate contender in Lucky Jeremy, who won the Riley Allison Derby, coming in from, the big time at Churchill Downs. And if that wasn't enough, we had kind of leading categories in all the thoroughbred divisions on those both days. It was a busy back-to-back six parts of stakes.
Speaking of that, let's talk about the Corralito Steakhouse and then the La Senora Stakes. Those were the 2 races that featured on Thursday's live racing.
They were, and it was kind of a civil war for the Finchers, as Todd Fincher's community leader just held off his dad's horse in that race, and that was a horse that was coming on the inside and certainly ran a great race for Leroy Fincher, who is Todd's father, and it was, quite a battle as Marking Canyon made it close. But community leader is the unanimous choice, I think, for top 2-year-old from last year in the New Mexico thoroughbred ranks. And certainly with that win in the Corralito Stakes is still the leading 3-year-old New Mexico thoroughbred. It'll be interesting to see if this horse comes back, February 18th on Sunland Derby Day, because there'll be some big events for him, I would think, and certainly worth a lot of money. And it's actually going to be the New Mexico Breeders' Derby, and we've moved that towards the end of the season, so he'll have a little more time to get over the big effort that he had last Thursday. The other stakes that we had was the La Senora Stakes, and paying off my marker. Got a great ride from the Cajun rider Tracy Abear. Got off like a bullet and then just stalked the pace and won in an absolute hand ride. And I think that paying off the marker as far as the girls go, certainly one to watch for any kind of event in our future.
Now, you mentioned the Riley Allison Derby. I want to get to that in a moment. But first, the Bold Ego Handicap, one of the first of 4 stakes races last Friday. Bold Ego Handicap, one of the most well-known signature stakes races here at Sunland Park during the live racing season. How did it end up?
I have fond memories of Bold Ego, Steve. That was at the time, the early 80s. New Mexico thoroughbreds were not really on the map nationally. Quarter horses were, but I remember when Bold Ego, started his career in 1980 right here at Sunland and won the Riley Allison Futurity. I was good friends with J.D. Barton. Of course, Cliff Lambert was his trainer, and he was just a barrel full of speed. They took him to Oaklawn Park at the age of 3, and he ripped off all kinds of stakes wins at Oaklawn, and it all jettisoned him to the Triple Crown. He set the fastest pace in Kentucky Derby history, and then he ran a big second in the Preakness. So Bold Ego made a real impact in New Mexico racing back then, and was a great daddy, too. He sired many, many horses, and you can tell by their names because Ego was always in it. And at the time, Steve, that race used to be, it was always made for fillies and mares, and the winner of the race would get a free breeding to Bold Ego. So there was an extra bonus. Of course, Bold Ego's passed away, but in this year's Bold Ego, Chesterette for Bart Home waited for the speed to exhaust itself. It was a hot pace, and Bart Home, Chesterette, horse that I followed throughout her career, got the job done, and now has wins at Turf Paradise, Zia Park, and Sunland. It was a bit of a surprise because I thought that there might have been some other horses there that might have been a little classier. There was even a Steve Asmussen horse in there that Chesterette pretty much, demolished.
As far as the Borderplex Stakes and the Fort Bliss Stakes, 2 other big races from last Friday, any surprises there, Eric?
You know what? Not in the Borderplex, Steve, because I'm very, very high on Candy Isle. It's kind of a horse that I kind of get confused with Eye Candy, and they're both trained by Todd Fincher. But Candy Isle is the local power to maybe win the Sunland Oaks. She's that good. It was only a 5-horse field, Steve, and she got into a lot of trouble, couldn't really find racing room until just in time at about the midway mark of the stretch, and just exploded to the front and won in a hand ride. And I don't think she's going to have any trouble translating her ability from a sprint to a route. And Todd's got a major threat there to win that rich Sunland Park Oaks, which, by the way, is worth a lot of money and offers points to the Kentucky Oaks. So it'd be nice to see Todd be in the Kentucky Oaks again. I think he was in last year's running of the Kentucky Oaks with that nice filly, Full Connection, I think the name is, or Flying Connection. She ran 6th out of a field of 20 in last year's Kentucky Oaks, and of course strolled in our Sunland Park Oaks. In that race, our Sunland Park Oaks is worth $250,000. So look for Candy Island to wheel right back on February the 18th. Big surprise, though, in the Fort Bliss Stakes. Not that he's, an unknown horse. Espionage is a really tough, gritty, kind of a welterweight, but certainly a horse that's fought the battles throughout the entire nation, really. He's run big races at Oaklawn, and he got good again at New Mexico, running big races at, I called him winning at Albuquerque in a nighttime race. He did pretty good at Zia. And what happened in the Fort Bliss is, once again, the pace was so hot that the early leaders just could not hang on. And Espionage's game is coming from behind and finishing with a flourish. And it didn't look like he was ever going to win. But the horse on the lead finally got tired, and Espionage was obliged to take over.
I love it. And now back to the Riley Allison for a second. You talked about the Churchill horse coming in. Was that something you expected for this race? Shippers, especially those coming from places like Churchill Downs, or did you feel like the Riley Allison was going to have more of a local flavor for that race?
I was surprised. It made the race better. There were a couple of late scratches, so the field dwindled from 8 to 6. But I really like what I saw with Lucky Jeremy. All you need to do is put your eyes on him when he's in the post parade, and he's on his toes. He's ready to go. He's well bred. He's by a stallion called Looking at Lucky, who's highly regarded throughout the country. His owner, Jeremy Ramsland, I know we've talked about a lot, over the years, winning local stakes here. But he got a nationally known trainer, Bill Morey, and they got interested in our series of races. They are interested in running in the Sunland Derby, and they knew that it's important to maybe get a spin over the track, and they got it. And I think that he won with, consummate ease. He really looked that good. He waited. He relaxed. I think it was his first race around 2 turns. And that's always a big challenge for a young 3-year-old, because his win at Churchill was over the mud, and it was only 1 turn. But he waited to make his move. Boy, there were a lot of closing winners last week. Most of them came from off the pace. But Lucky Jeremy is just going to love a routing. He won by 2 lengths. He won in a time of 1:36 and change. I think the buyer is going to be either in the high 80s or a 90. So once again, it's good news for the Sunland Derby. And the horse that was second, A Lot of Luck. Very nice speed type. Probably doesn't want to go this far, but he's got a big heart, and he made Lucky Jeremy work a little. But Lucky Jeremy had a lot of speed in reserve, and I think that those two will come back on February the 18th and run in our Sunland Derby. And Bill Morey is kind of like a staple on the Kentucky circuit, Steve. So never had him here before. Really thrilled about it. He put away those Steve Asmussen shippers, and maybe we'll see some different horses from the Asmussen barn, for the Sunland Derby. But I was very, very pleased, and I know Dustin Dix was too, that we got that type of a horse to run in our prep.
I'm excited for you. Eric Alwan with us. He's the voice of Sunland Park Racetrack here on our weekly edition of Track Talk. You mentioned it. Other horses potentially coming in town for the Sunland Derby. And because of the prowess of the shippers, like Lucky Jeremy, you wonder if there'll be any other local horses entering into the Derby, or if this could be one of those races that's featuring out-of-town shippers from all over the country.
You know, it could get more flavor in the sense that the Sunland Derby, if you win it, doesn't exactly get you into the Kentucky Derby anymore. It gets you halfway with 20 points. So if there are any other Kentucky horsemen that are interested, you know, we invite them to come because it's such an important stepping stone. And we're earlier than we have been. We're like 5 weeks earlier. So there's still time to hopscotch to another prep somewhere in the country in, you know, mid-March, late March. And then you're in the Derby if you just run well enough. So you got to win our Sunland Derby and then maybe be second or third in a higher echelon prep race somewhere in the country. Maybe even in Santa Anita.
That would be huge. I know this weekend, no signature stakes races to highlight. However, how about horses racing Saturday and Sunday at Sunland that at least if you're heading to the track this weekend, you should keep a pretty close eye on, Eric? Who would you like to highlight?
I've got one. I think one real good one. You know, the reason for the paucity of no stakes, we didn't want to compete with possibly Dallas being in a, you know, a playoff game. Plus the NFL playoff games get such big attention. So it's the 1 week where there's no stakes. Here's a good horse running on Sunday. We're going to have, that's a quarter horse day, by the way. But believe it or not, we're going to have 4 straight 870 races to begin the day. So you might see a couple of thoroughbreds in those 870 races. And I like a horse called Coister, who's running in the second race here at Sunland on Sunday. This horse has won 4 of his last 5 races, won easily here on opening weekend, going 870. Never seen the thoroughbreds do so good against the quarter horses going 870 as this year. But Casey Lambert, his trainer's got this thoroughbred just in tuned. He's a good speed horse going like 5 to 5.5 furlongs, but he might be an even better 870 horse because he just puts away his rivals with such ease. There's another horse in the race that possibly include as an exact accompaniment, and that's Running in the Rain, who missed his break last time out. That means he got a slow start, and he closed to get second against a horse called Rocky Bar 6 last time out. But he made up about 5 lengths, and I've seen him win going 1,000 yards. So that's pretty close enough for me to endorse him going 870, you know, for the bottom spots. But Coister's got the rail, Steve. So I think he's in a great spot. Even if he doesn't get the lead into the turn, he can find a path to run through and do very well. It could be an example of trying to wheel a horse. Do you know what that means? Like you take Coister, and then you take everybody else in the field. It would cost about $12 or $6 if you do $1. So as long as Coister wins, you hit the exacta.
Well, that's nice, especially if potentially a long shot comes in second. That happen. Really would have a chance to pay.
It could. And being that there's only 6 other rivals, it's not too expensive.
Yep, I like it. Eric, as always, appreciate the time.
Thank you, sir.
We'll look forward to having you back with us again next week here on Track Talk.
Take care. Appreciate it.